The first sound I registered was the wet, tearing crunch of my own ribs snapping. It wasn't the pain that shocked me. I was long past feeling that, but the sound. A grotesque, intimate percussion that vibrated through the marrow of my being. I was pinned beneath a weight of fur and fury, the coppery scent of my blood filling the air, mixing with the damp earth and the bitter ozone of a storm that refused to break. Above me, the full moon was a swollen, mocking eye witnessing everything. Pathetic. The voice was a low growl, vibrating through the paw pressed against my shattered chest. It was Weston. His wolf form was a mountain of shadow and silver-tipped fur, eyes like chips of glacial ice. He leaned down, his hot breath fogging in the cold air. You never could hold your shift, a runt to the last. My human form was a broken doll beneath him. I tried to summon the change, to call the wolf that lived in my blood, but the connection was a frayed and distant thread. The pack bond, once a warm hum in the back of my skull, was silent. Severed, I was alone. Weston, enough. The new voice cut through the clearing like a blade. It wasn't loud, but it carried the absolute weight of command. The pressure on my chest eased as Weston's massive head swung toward the tree line. He emerged from the shadows not as a wolf, but as a man. Jason, my alpha, the one I had cherished most. He was barefoot, wearing only a pair of dark pants, his torso gleaming in the moonlight as if carved from the same stone as the cliffs behind our territory. His presence was a physical force, tightening the air, demanding submission from every living thing, including me. Even now, broken and bleeding, my traitorous heart gave a weak, painful throb at the sight of him. Weston shifted back with a ripple of agony that sounded like popping joints and sighing flesh. He stood, naked and unashamed, a cruel smile on his handsome face. Just teaching a lesson, Alpha. The rogue was trespassing on the eastern ridge. Again. She is not a rogue. Jason's voice was flat, but his eyes, those devastating mercury silver eyes, finally landed on me. There was no warmth there. No recognition of the years I'd spent by his side, of the loyalty I'd poured at his feet. There was only a cold, assessing distance. She is pack, or what's left of it. What's left of it? The words were a new kind of fracture. Evelyn was what was left. The weakest link, the failed beta, the disappointment. Jason walked toward me, each step deliberate. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I could hear the distant rush of the river, the skitter of a night creature fleeing the alpha's aura. My own breathing was a ragged, wet thing. I tried to push myself up on my elbows, but a white-hot lance of pain stole my strength, and my vision swam. He stopped, looking down at me. The chemistry between us had once been a live wire, a magnetic pull that had felt like destiny. Now it was a ghost limb, a phantom sensation of a connection that had been amputated. The tension was still there, but it was made of frost and shattered glass. You were told not to go beyond the creek, Evelyn. His use of my name was impersonal, an administrative scolding. Your control is too fragile. You're a liability. I was tracking the scent, I gasped, the words tasting of blood. The one that doesn't belong. It's strong on the ridge, I thought. You thought you could prove yourself, Weston finished, sneering. He had pulled on a pair of trousers from a nearby stump. You can't. You're a broken thing. You always have been. Since the night your parents... Weston. Jason's single word was a warning that cracked through the clearing like thunder. Weston fell silent, but his smug satisfaction hung in the air like poison. That was my first mistake, thinking I could still contribute, that I could still be something other than a burden to the pack, to him. Jason crouched down, bringing his face level with mine. Up close, I could see the flecks of darker gray in his irises, the faint scar that bisected his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a challenge years ago, a challenge I'd helped him win. His scent, cedar and cold night air, washed over me, a torturous reminder of everything I'd lost. "The ridge is off limits," he said, his voice dropping so only I could hear. It wasn't gentle. It was final. "Your little excursions end tonight. You will stay in the village. You will attend to Bethany in the healing house. You will not shift unless supervised. Do you understand?" It was a sentence, a confinement, the final nail in the coffin of the life I'd once dreamed of, standing beside him as his Luna. The humiliation burned hotter than my broken bones. I wanted to argue, to scream that the strange, oily scent on the ridge was a threat, that I knew it in my gut. But the words died in my throat. The Alpha had spoken. "I understand," I whispered, the submission sour on my tongue. He gave a single, curt nod. Then he did something that stole the last remnant of air from my lungs. He reached out, not to help me, but to brush a strand of mud-caked hair from my forehead. His fingertips were searing against my cold skin. The simple contact sent a jolt through my system, a pathetic echo of the mate bond I'd once been so sure was forming between us. My breath hitched. His eyes narrowed, searching my face. For a second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, something flickered in those silver depths. Something that looked like conflict or maybe regret. Little did I know. That was the last time I would see anything resembling softness in his gaze. Then it was gone, shuttered behind a wall of impenetrable ice. He stood up, turning his back on me. "Take her to Bethany," he said to Weston, his tone dismissing me from his world. "See that she's restrained." Restrained. The word echoed in the silent clearing. Weston's grin was a sickle moon. "With pleasure, Alpha." As Jason melted back into the forest without a backward glance, Weston hauled me to my feet. I cried out as the movement jarred my injuries. He slung my arm over his shoulder, his grip biting into my flesh. "Come on, little Evelyn," he cooed, his voice a venomous parody of kindness. "Let's get you tucked away where you can't cause any more trouble." The walk back to the pack village was a blur of agony and shame. We passed the training grounds, where a few late-night warriors paused to watch, their expressions a mix of pity and contempt. I kept my eyes on the ground, on the familiar path I'd run 1,000 times in joy, now a road to a cage. The healing house was a warm, herb-scented haven, a place that usually smelled of safety. Tonight, it felt like a prison cell. Bethany was waiting, her kind, plump face etched with worry. She was the pack's head healer, an Omega with a core of gentle steel. "Oh, by the moon, Evelyn," she breathed, rushing forward to help Weston deposit me on a low cot. "What happened?" "She was stupid," Weston said, lingering in the doorway. "Again, Alpha's orders. Patch her up and keep her here. She's not to leave." Bethany's eyes flashed with a rare anger as she began to assess my wounds, her hands deft and sure. "I know my orders, Beta Weston. You can go." Weston's smirk didn't fade. He looked at me, his eyes crawling over my broken body. "Sweet dreams, Runt. Don't worry about that scent on the ridge. The real wolves will handle it." He left, shutting the door with a firm click that sounded horribly final. Bethany worked in silence for a few minutes, cleaning wounds, applying poultices that cooled the fire in my ribs. The only sounds were my hissed breaths, the crackle of the fire in the hearth, and the soft, rhythmic scrape of her mortar and pestle. "He's wrong, you know," she said quietly, not looking up from her work. "You're not a liability." "Aren't I?" The words were a broken rasp. "Jason thinks so. The pack thinks so." "Jason is," she trailed off, choosing her words carefully. "The Alpha carries burdens we cannot see. Since the last moon cycle, he has been different. Harder, it's not just you. Different, harder." The words planted a seed of uneasy mystery. What burden had changed him? What had happened last full moon? "He used to listen to me," I said, the confession torn from me. Now he looks at me like I'm a stranger, like I'm nothing. Bethany's hands stilled. She met my eyes, her gaze deep and sorrowful. The bond between an alpha and his beta is sacred. If it is damaged, it can make an alpha unstable. They can become paranoid. They push away those closest to them. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Henry has seen it too. He's worried. Henry, the pack's senior elder, a man of few words and ancient wisdom. If he was worried, it was serious. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying the man who banished you to this cot is not the same Jason who fought the Shadow Fen pack to save you 3 years ago. She pressed a final bandage gently to my side. Something is poisoning his mind. And Weston, she shook her head, unwilling to finish the thought. What happened next changed everything. The door to the healing house burst open. Not Weston returning, but a young warrior, his face pale, his chest heaving. Bethany, you're needed at the Alpha's lodge. Now it's Henry. He's collapsed. Bethany was on her feet in an instant, grabbing her satchel. She threw a conflicted look at me. Stay, please, Evelyn, for your own safety. She rushed out, following the warrior into the night. Silence descended, thick and heavy. The fire popped. The wind moaned against the shutters. Henry, collapsed, the elder who was worried. The only one besides Bethany who ever showed me kindness anymore. The Alpha's orders echoed in my head. You will stay. You will be restrained. But another command, older and more primal, stirred in my blood. The pack was in trouble. An elder was down. And a strange, oily scent lingered on the eastern ridge, a scent that made the wolf inside me whimper in fear and recognition. I pushed myself up, gritting my teeth against the symphony of pain. I wasn't strong. I wasn't in control, but I was still pack, or I had been. I stumbled to the window, pushing it open. The cold night air slapped my face, clearing the fog of pain and herbs. In the distance, up the hill, lights blazed in the Alpha's lodge. Figures moved urgently. And then I saw it. A shadow, sleek and low to the ground, detached itself from the tree line behind the lodge. It wasn't a wolf from our pack. Its silhouette was wrong, leaner, longer. It moved with a sinister, liquid grace, heading not toward the commotion, but toward the back of the lodge, toward the Alpha's private chambers. Toward Jason. The oily scent from the ridge flooded my memory. It was here. It was here. Every instinct screamed at me to sound the alarm, to howl, to run. But my wolf was silent, suppressed by injury and command. I was just Evelyn, broken, restrained. But as I watched that shadow slink into the heart of our pack, into his space, a new feeling ignited in my chest, hotter than any pain. It wasn't love. It wasn't loyalty. It was a cold, clear certainty. This was no accident. Henry's collapse, the strange scent, Jason's coldness, Weston's cruelty. They were threads in a darker tapestry, one I was only just beginning to see. The Alpha I cherished most was in danger, and the pack that had cast me out was blind to the wolf in their midst. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from a rising, ferocious purpose. I looked down at my bandaged human body, a liability, a runt. I swung my legs over the windowsill, the cold ground biting my bare feet. The moon, that swollen, watchful eye, seemed to pulse in agreement. Let them think I'm restrained, I thought, the taste of vengeance, sharp and new, on my tongue. Let them think I'm broken. I dropped into the night and began to run. The silence after Bethany's hurried departure was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. Evelyn lay on her cot, the phantom scent of oil and wrongness clinging to her memory, warring with the sharp, clean smell of Bethany's herbs. Henry collapsed. At the lodge, the words echoed, a cold stone in her gut. If only I had known then that his collapse wasn't an illness, but a warning shot. A low groan escaped her as she pushed herself up, broken ribs protesting like shards of glass grinding together. The pain was an anchor, tethering her to the reality of her weakness. But beneath the pain, a new current flowed, not the shattered devotion of before, but a cold, clear stream of suspicion. Jason's changed behavior. The corrupted bond Bethany described. The oily scent on the eastern ridge, a place Jason had forbidden. And now, the pack's senior elder falling at the Alpha's own doorstep. It was too much to be coincidence. The healing house was empty, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. From outside, the normal sounds of the pack village continued. The distant clang of practice swords from the training grounds, the chatter of she-wolves, the yelp of a pup. Life went on, oblivious. Evelyn swung her legs over the cot's edge, her bare feet meeting the cool wooden floor. Every movement was agony, but she embraced it. The pain kept the grief at bay, sharpened her focus. She needed to see, she needed to know. Using the cot post, she hauled herself upright, black spots dancing in her vision. She waited, breathing shallowly through the fire in her side. Then, step by agonizing step, she moved to the window. The shutter was slightly ajar. She peered out, her view limited to a slice of the central clearing and the path that wound up the hill toward the Alpha's lodge. A small crowd had gathered at the lodge's entrance. She saw Bethany's hunched form, the green of her healer's sash vivid against the dark timber of the lodge. Warriors stood in a loose, tense circle. And there, towering over them all, was Jason. Even from this distance, the change in him was a punch to her soul. He stood rigid, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He wasn't kneeling by Henry, wasn't showing the concern an alpha should for a fallen elder. He was observing. As Bethany and another healer worked on the prone form of Henry, Jason's head turned, scanning the forest line, his gaze lingering on the eastern ridge. A cold knot tightened in Evelyn's stomach. Then Weston emerged from the lodge, striding to Jason's side. He leaned in, speaking quickly. Jason gave a single, sharp nod. Weston's mouth curled into a thin, satisfied smile that made Evelyn's blood run cold. He turned and barked an order, and two warriors broke from the circle, jogging down the hill toward the village, their expressions grim. They're not fetching help. They're securing something, or someone. The thought was instinctive, a wolf's intuition screaming through the human fog of injury. She ducked back from the window, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. She couldn't stay here. This room, meant for healing, felt like a beautifully appointed cage. Bethany's kindness was a trap of inaction. The sound of heavy boots on the hard-packed earth outside the healing house sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. They were coming this way, fast. Panic, sharp and clean, cut through her pain. She wasn't ready. She couldn't face Weston again, not like this. Her eyes darted around the room, the cots, the herb shelves, the small rear door that led to the wastewater runnel and the forest beyond. It was used for taking soiled linens to the creek. It was her only chance. Moving faster than she thought possible, she snatched Bethany's spare healer's cloak from a peg, the gray wool ruff against her fingers. She flung it over her shoulders, pulling the deep hood up. The boots were at the door, too far. She'd have to go barefoot. The front door latch rattled. Evelyn slipped through the rear door just as the front one swung open with a thud. She pulled it silently closed behind her, leaving only a crack to hear. "Where is she?" Weston's voice, a whip crack in the quiet room. "She was resting, Beta Weston," came the uncertain reply of a young warrior. "The healer said she was not to be disturbed." "The healer isn't giving orders anymore. Find her. Check the village. The Alpha wants her secured." Secured, not comforted, not protected. Secured like a threat, like a prisoner. Evelyn didn't wait to hear more. She turned and plunged into the narrow, muddy runnel behind the healing house, the cold muck squelching between her toes. The scent of damp earth and herbs was overwhelming. She kept low, using the high banks of the runnel for cover, and moved away from the village center, toward the creek that marked the western boundary. Her mind raced. Jason wanted her secured. Why? Because she'd been on the ridge. Because Henry had collapsed after voicing concerns about him. A terrible, chilling logic began to form. What happened next changed everything, because it forced me to see the board on which we were all just pieces. She reached the creek, the water burbling over smooth stones. Here, the runnel emptied and she was exposed. The forest on the other side was dense, offering cover. It was also technically outside the village boundary, another transgression. She hesitated, listening. From the village, a raised voice, Weston's, furious. "She's gone, find her." The hunt was on. Evelyn waded into the creek, the icy water biting into her ankles, her calves, a shocking counterpoint to the throbbing heat of her injuries. She gasped but pushed forward, the current tugging at her legs. Reaching the other side, she scrambled up the bank and melted into the tree line, the cloak snagging on brambles. She had no plan, only a drive to put distance between herself and the lodge, to find a place to think, to breathe air that wasn't thick with betrayal. She moved inland, away from the creek, climbing a slight rise where a granite outcrop offered a view back toward the village and the lodge on its hill. She found a hollow shielded by ferns and collapsed into it, trembling from pain, cold, and exertion. Pulling the damp cloak tighter, she peered through the fronds. The village was in a subdued uproar. Warriors moved in pairs, searching the outskirts. Her eyes were drawn inexorably to the lodge. The crowd had dispersed. Henry was gone, presumably carried inside. Bethany was nowhere to be seen. And Jason stood alone on the lodge's wide porch, staring out across his territory. The setting sun cast his profile in bronze, but it looked like a statue of an alpha, not the living man she had loved. Then he turned his head, not toward the village, not toward the searching warriors. He looked directly east toward the ridge, and he smiled. It was a small, private thing, utterly devoid of warmth, a predator's smile of anticipation. A rustle in the undergrowth to her left, too close. Evelyn froze, sinking lower into the ferns. Her wolf, battered and silent since her punishment, stirred uneasily in the depths of her soul. The scent that reached her was not pack. It was damp fur, pine, and a faint, underlying musk she didn't recognize. A patrol, from a different sector. She held her breath, her broken ribs screaming in protest. Two figures emerged from the trees, not 20 paces from her hiding spot. They were pack warriors, but not from the village guard. They were from the Eastern Border Patrol, and they were talking in low, tense voices. Absolute madness. Did you smell it? That close to the creek. The first, a grizzled veteran named Cale, muttered. Like rotten meat and lightning. The second, a younger wolf named Rylan, replied. Weston's orders were clear. See nothing, report nothing, just keep the perimeter. Since when do we ignore a breach? That wasn't a stray coyote. That was something else, and it was heading toward the village. Cale spat on the ground. The Alpha should be told. The Alpha gave Weston full command of security, Rylan said, his voice uneasy. You heard him at the last moon meeting. Question the Beta, you question me. I'm not losing my rank over a bad smell. Cale grunted, his hand resting on his knife hilt. Something's wrong. Henry collapsing. The Beta's witch hunt for Evelyn. And now this stink from the Shadow Fen direction. Feels like a storm coming. Shadow Fen. The name was a cold blade. Their old rivals, quiet for years, the oily scent. Was it them? Some new weapon, some poison. Our job is to patrol, Rylan said, though he sounded unconvinced. Not to question, come on. We're due at the southern checkpoint. They moved off, their footsteps fading into the forest gloom. Evelyn remained motionless, her mind stitching the fragments together. Weston suppressing reports of intruders. An anomalous scent from the direction of a rival pack. Jason, distant and cold, smiling at the eastern dark. Henry, who suspected Jason, struck down. And her, the inconvenient former beta who knew too much about the way things used to be, who had caught the scent first. She was not being secured for her safety. She was being silenced. The revelation was a cold flood, washing away the last remnants of her heartbreak, leaving behind something hard and sharp. This wasn't just personal rejection. This was a coup, and Jason was either at the center of it, or he was its primary victim. As dusk deepened into night, a new sound reached her, a sound that didn't belong. It was a soft, skittering rustle, like claws on bark, but fluid, too smooth. It came from the direction of the lodge, from the dense, old-growth pines that flanked its northern side. The wind shifted, carrying a scent down to her hiding place. Oil, decay, ozone. The shadow creature. It was here, and it was moving with purpose, a dark smear against the darker trees, ascending the hill not toward the village, but toward the back of the Alpha's lodge. It was going inside. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to survive. But the image of Jason on the porch, smiling that empty smile at the approaching night, locked her in place. Was he waiting for it? Was this his doing? Or was he the target? The creature reached the lodge's rear, a patch of deeper darkness that seemed to flow up the wall and slip through a high, small window, the window to the lodge's private study. Jason's sanctum. A light flickered on in that room. Evelyn acted without thought. The pain was a distant echo. The fear was fuel. She left the cloak in the ferns and moved, not away into the safe dark, but toward the lodge, keeping to the deepest shadows. She was a ghost in her own territory, a wounded she-wolf limping toward the heart of the mystery that had broken her. She reached the tree line at the base of the lodge's hill. The back of the lodge was here, the study window a soft yellow square above her. There was a trellis, old and sturdy, thick with dormant vine. It led up to a narrow balcony outside the study. It was madness. She could barely walk, but she had to know. Her first pull on the wood sent a white-hot lance of agony through her side. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, swallowing the cry. Hand over hand, foot finding purchase, she climbed. The world narrowed to the next grip, the next breath, the yellow light above. The sounds of the distant village search faded away. There was only the creak of the trellis, the whistle of her own pained breath, and the low, indistinct murmur of voices from inside the room. She reached the balcony, a small stone platform barely large enough for two people. She crouched below the window sill, her body trembling with strain. The window was cracked open, just an inch for air. Two voices filtered out. One was Jason's, but not the cold, hard alpha from the clearing. This voice was different, strained, thick as if speaking through water. Cannot hold, it is relentless. The second voice was the sound of cracking ice and grinding stone. It held no warmth, no life. The binding requires sustenance. The elder's resistance was unfortunate. He was stronger than anticipated. Henry. They were talking about Henry. You said the transfer would be clean. Jason's voice, a desperate hiss. You said my pack would be strong. Your pack is a vessel, the oily voice replied, utterly devoid of empathy. The strength of the shadow Fen Alpha flows to you through the bond we forged, but the vessel must be emptied of contradictions. The elder was a contradiction. The she-wolf, Evelyn, is a profound one. Her bond to you, though severed, leaves a resonance. It interferes. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. Shadow Fen Alpha, a transfer, a binding. Jason wasn't betraying them. He was being overwritten. And she, their past bond, was a flaw in the process. She is being dealt with, Jason said, the strain evident. See that she is. The final alignment is at the new moon, when the silver light is gone. Then the transfer will be complete, and you will rule as a true alpha of Shadow Fen's line, and this pack will be our forward claw. But only if the vessel is pure. The new moon, 3 days away. What happened next was a mistake born of sheer, gut-wrenching horror. Evelyn's foot, numb with cold and pain, slipped on the balcony stone. It was barely a scrape, but in the silent night it was a gunshot. The murmuring inside stopped. The oily voice, now a razor whisper, said, "You have a shadow, little alpha." The window was flung open, and framed in the golden light, not Jason, but a nightmare looked down at her. It had Jason's face, his broad shoulders, but its eyes were pools of liquid tar, and its smile was full of teeth that were too long, too sharp. It was the shadow creature, wearing Jason's skin like a ill-fitting suit. Behind it, the real Jason, her Jason, was visible for a split second. He was on his knees, his face a mask of silent agony, his hands clutching his head, his own eyes wide with a terror and recognition that shattered Evelyn's world. He saw her, and in his gaze was a plea, a warning, and a love that the thing inside him had not been able to fully erase. "Evelyn," the thing that was not Jason said with his mouth, the voice a horrific blend of his own and the grinding ice. "You came home." The creature's hand, Jason's hand, shot out to grab her. End of chapter 2. Jason's eyes, his real eyes, a flash of desperate, familiar green in the shadow-warped face, pleaded with me. "Run." The creature wearing his skin smiled. A contradiction at the window. How efficient. Its voice was Jason's baritone, but layered with a dry, rustling corruption, like beetles scuttling over dead leaves. The sound of it severed the last frozen thread holding me to the windowsill. I dropped. My injured body screamed as I hit the hard-packed earth beneath the lodge's balcony. A grunt of pain was torn from my throat. Inside, I heard a low, amused chuckle. Then Weston's voice, sharp from the study doorway. "What was that? Move, Evelyn, now." I rolled, scrambling into the deeper shadows of the foundation plantings. My ribs were a cage of white-hot agony, every breath a knife. The balcony doors above me slid open. I pressed myself into the cold soil, my heart a frantic drum against the earth. If only I had known how deep the rot went, I would never have come so close. "Probably a raccoon," the thing with Jason's voice said from above. Its oily scent, now mingled with Jason's pine and snow signature, drifted down, making my stomach churn. "The woods are full of little pests tonight. Secure the perimeter, Weston. The transfer is too delicate for interruptions." "At once, Alpha," Weston replied, his tone dripping with a loyalty he'd never shown the true Jason. Heavy boots retreated inside. I didn't wait. Pushing through the pain, I crawled on my belly, away from the lodge and into the cover of a rhododendron thicket. The moment I was shrouded, I forced myself to my feet and ran, a limping, silent dash for the tree line. Every shadow seemed to hold Weston's eyes. Every rustle was the pursuit. My mind replayed the scene in jagged fragments. The shadow creature, seamless in Jason's form. The real Jason, a prisoner behind his own eyes. A binding. A transfer. Eliminate the contradictions. The new moon. The pieces, once scattered and terrifying, now locked together with a dreadful, final click. This wasn't just Jason's betrayal. It was his annihilation. And the pack was the prize. I didn't stop until I'd crossed the creek, the cold water soaking my leggings, washing some of the lodge's scent away. I collapsed on the far bank, heaving, listening. No sounds of chase. Not yet. They thought I was a pest. A nuisance. They didn't know I'd heard everything. I needed to get back to my hollow. I needed to think. But a new, more terrible thought emerged. Bethany. She was in the healing house, oblivious. Henry was there, incapacitated. Were they next on the list of contradictions to be eliminated? The forest at night was a symphony of normalcy. Crickets, the whisper of leaves, a distant owl. It felt like a mockery. I moved west, a ghost in my own territory, avoiding the worn paths. The granite outcrop rose before me, a dark sentinel. I slipped into the fern hollow beneath it, my sanctuary. Only then, in the damp, earthy darkness, did I let the tremors take me. I wrapped my arms around my knees, shaking, not from cold, from the sheer, universe-shattering horror of it. The man I loved, the alpha I had pledged my life to, was being erased. And his beta, my replacement, was the usurper's lieutenant. The pack slept on, trusting the wolf wearing their leader's face. What happened next would change everything. I could run. I could disappear into the wilds, a lone wolf. The thought was a seductive whisper. But the memory of Jason's green eyes, screaming in silence, nailed my soul to this cursed ground. I couldn't leave him, and I couldn't let Shadow Fen have our home. But I was one wounded she-wolf against an alpha possessed, a traitor beta, and an unseen enemy pack. I had no rank, no allies, no strength. No, not true. I had Bethany's kindness. I had Henry's suspicion before he fell. And I had the testimony of 2 border warriors who smelled the truth, but were ordered to ignore it. Kale and Rylan. A plan, fragile and desperate, began to form. It started with the only person I could still trust. The hours until dawn were an eternity. I dozed fitfully, every snap of a twig jolting me awake. When the first gray light filtered through the ferns, I was already moving. I needed to get to Bethany before the pack fully stirred, before Weston made his morning rounds to secure me. Circling wide, I approached the village from the north, using the smoke from morning cookfires for cover. The scent of baking bread and wood smoke was achingly familiar, a punch of nostalgia that brought tears to my eyes. This was what I was fighting for, not just Jason, but this, the simple, peaceful morning. I watched from behind the woodpile as warriors left their cabins for the training grounds. I saw Weston stride from the Alpha's lodge, barking orders, his posture one of absolute authority. The lodge itself felt dark, a silent hive of wrongness. When the path was clear, I darted across the open space to the back of the healing house. The rear window to Bethany's private storeroom was slightly ajar. I tapped on the frame, a rapid, urgent rhythm we'd used as girls. A moment later, Bethany's worried face appeared. Her eyes widened. "Evelyn, goddess, get in here." She hauled me through the window, her omega strength surprising. She closed the shutter and bolted it, then turned to me. "Where have you been? Weston has warriors looking for you. He says you're delirious from your injuries, a danger to yourself." "He's the danger, Bethany," I gasped, leaning against a shelf of drying herbs. "To all of us, listen to me, you were right. Something is terribly wrong with Jason." I told her everything, the shadow on the ridge, the conversation between Kale and Rylan, climbing the lodge, the creature in the study wearing Jason like a suit, the binding, the transfer, the contradictions, the new moon deadline. She listened, her face growing paler with each word. When I described Jason's trapped eyes, a tear traced down her cheek. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, the silence in the storeroom was thick. "A soul-binding transfer," she whispered, her healer's mind latching onto the mechanics. "Forbidden magic, Shadow Fen lore. It requires a vessel of equal or greater power, and the systematic removal of anything that ties the vessel's soul to its old life. Memories, deep loyalties, people." Her gaze flew to the curtain separating us from the main infirmary where Henry lay. "The elder, he was the first. You were to be the second." I nodded, my throat tight. "Weston is helping it. He's suppressing reports, hunting me. The pack is blind." Bethany began to pace, her fingers twisting in her apron. "This explains the sickness." Not a physical illness, but a spiritual war happening inside our alpha. He's fighting it, Evelyn. He must be, or the transfer would already be complete. He is, I said, the memory of that green flash giving me a sliver of steel resolve. But he's losing. We have until the new moon. That's 3 nights from now. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her expression shifting from fear to a grim, determined calculation. What do you need? I need you to keep Henry safe. Make it seem like his condition is worsening. Keep everyone away from him, especially Weston. He's a living witness. Done, she said without hesitation. I need information. Anything in the old lore about severing such a binding. A weakness. I'll look, the Elders' archives, there may be something. And I took a steadying breath. I need to speak to Cale, the border warrior. He knows something's wrong, he might listen. Bethany's face clouded. That's too dangerous. Weston will be watching anyone who showed doubt. I have to try. He's a veteran. If he believes me, others might. We need eyes on the eastern border. We need to know if Shadow Fen is moving into position. A sudden noise from the front of the house made us both freeze. The main door opening, boots on the floorboards. Weston's voice, smooth and lethal, called out, "Healer Bethany, a moment." Bethany's eyes locked with mine, wide with panic. She shoved me toward a large, empty herb barrel. In, now, don't breathe. I climbed in, pulling the wooden lid over me just as the storeroom curtain was swept aside. A narrow crack in the staves gave me a slivered view. Weston stood in the doorway, filling it. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the closed window shutter. "You're up early, healer." "Elder Henry had a restless night," Bethany said, her voice impressively steady. She turned to her workbench, busying herself with mortar and pestle. "Can I help you, Beta? I'm checking on our patient and our other problem. Any sign of Evelyn? She's unstable. The Alpha is concerned." "I haven't seen her since she fled," Bethany said, crushing herbs with more force than necessary. "Perhaps if the Alpha showed her the kindness he once did, she wouldn't be." Weston took a step into the room. The oily scent of the shadow creature clung faintly to him. "The Alpha's will is the Pack's will. Her defiance is a sickness, one we will cure." He walked slowly around the small space, his fingers trailing over shelves. He stopped near my barrel. My heart hammered against my ribs so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "You wouldn't be hiding her, would you, little Omega? That would be a profound betrayal. My only betrayal would be of my healer's oath if I turned away a wounded soul," Bethany shot back, a spark of defiance in her tone. "But she is not here. Search if you like. You'll disturb my patience." Weston stared at her for a long, terrifying moment. Then he smiled, a cold, thin thing. "I trust your word, healer, for now. The Alpha has commanded a pack gathering at dusk. Attendance is mandatory, even for the infirm." His eyes flicked toward the main room. "A new era requires unity. Ensure Henry is present. It will be good for the pack to see their elders supporting their Alpha." It was an order and a threat. "I will see to it," Bethany said, her voice flat. With a final, sweeping glance, Weston left. We listened as his footsteps receded through the main house and out the front door. I didn't emerge from the barrel until Bethany gave the all-clear. We looked at each other, the same realization dawning. "The gathering," I whispered. "It's a step, part of the transfer, forcing public submission, cementing the creature's control. And they want Henry there to either publicly submit or to be made an example of," Bethany finished, horror-stricken. "We can't let that happen. You have to make him too sick to move, a fever, something convincing." She nodded rapidly. "I can do that, but Evelyn, you can't stay here, it's not safe." "I know, I'm going to find Cale." The risk was monumental, but the clock was ticking. The gathering at dusk felt like a trap snapping shut. Bethany pressed a small pouch into my hand. Pain-dulling herbs, don't take them all at once. And this. It was a tiny, sharp silver blade, a lancet for healing. For more than herbs. The weight of it in my palm was both terrible and comforting. I hugged her quickly. Be safe. You are the one running toward the claws, she murmured. Then she pushed me toward the window. Go, and may the moon goddess guide you. I slipped back into the growing morning. The pack was awake now, the village bustling. I kept to the edges, a shadow among shadows, heading for the Eastern Border Patrol's usual muster point near the training grounds. I found Cale alone, checking the straps on his sparring vest before the morning drills. Rylan and others were warming up nearby. This was my only chance. I stepped from the trees, making no effort to hide my approach. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Recognition, then immediate caution. You, he growled low, stepping toward me to block me from the view of the others. Weston has every warrior looking for you. Get out of here before you're seen. I need to talk to you about the scent, about the orders to ignore it. His expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, I insisted, keeping my voice a desperate whisper. The oily scent from Shadow Fen. You smelled it, you know it's wrong. Weston told you to stand down. Why would a beta do that, Cale? Unless his orders weren't to protect the pack. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm, and pulled me deeper into the tree cover. You're speaking treason. I'm speaking the truth. Jason isn't Jason. He's being possessed by a Shadow Fen Alpha through a soul binding. Weston is helping. They're eliminating anyone who might see through it. Henry, me. The border is being left open for them. The pack is being handed over. He stared at me, a storm of conflict in his eyes. My words were insane, but they connected to the wrongness he'd sensed. The strange orders, the changed Alpha. Proof, he demanded, his voice rough. You have proof of this madness. I saw the creature wearing his skin last night in his study. I heard them planning it. The transfer completes on the new moon. There's a mandatory gathering at dusk today. It's part of the ritual, Cale, to bind the pack's will to the false Alpha. He released my arm, running a hand over his face. Goddess above, I need your eyes on the eastern ridge. I need to know if Shadow Fen is moving into position. And I need you to watch your back. Weston is the enemy. He was silent for a long moment, weighing a lifetime of loyalty against the evidence of his own senses. If you're wrong, we're both dead for treason. If I'm right and we do nothing, the pack is dead anyway. Or worse, enslaved. He met my gaze, and I saw the honest warrior, the protector, win out over the obedient soldier. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. I'll watch the ridge. I'll report only to you. But if this is a trick... It's not, I said, relief flooding me. I had one ally. Meet me at the creek bend north of the ridge after the gathering. Whatever happens at dusk, we'll know more. A whistle blew from the training grounds. Drills were starting. Go, Cale hissed. And don't get caught. I melted back into the forest as he strode toward the field, his posture once again that of the loyal warrior. But now he was my spy. The day passed in a blur of hiding and dread. From my fern hollow, I watched the village prepare for the gathering. A large fire pit was built in the central clearing. The air grew thick with a sense of forced celebration. As dusk approached, a deep, resonant howl echoed from the Alpha's lodge, a summoning. My blood ran cold. It was Jason's howl, but the timbre was off, colder, more commanding. The pack began to gather. From my vantage point, I saw Bethany supporting a visibly trembling, blanket-trapped Henry, his face pale and sweaty. She had succeeded. He looked deathly ill. Then the Alpha emerged. Jason walked from his lodge, Weston one step behind and to his left. He moved with Jason's graceful power, but it was exaggerated, a performance of strength. His eyes scanned the crowd, and even from this distance, they looked like dark pits. The pack bowed their heads, a wave of submission. He reached the fire, which was now blazing high. The pack formed a wide circle around him. Silence fell. "My pack," the thing began, and its voice carried, smooth and hypnotic. "We stand at the dawn of a new strength. The old rivalries, the old fears, they end now. Unity is not a request. It is the only path to survival." I watched, my hand over my mouth, as he preached a gospel of absolute obedience, of shedding the weakness of the past. He spoke of hard choices, of pruning the pack to make it stronger. His gaze settled on Henry, who was swaying on his feet, supported by Bethany. "Even our elders," the false alpha said, a smile touching its lips, "must embrace this new vigor. Do you, Elder Henry, pledge your unwavering spirit to this new dawn?" All eyes turned to Henry. Bethany held him tight. The old wolf lifted his head. His mouth opened, but only a wheeze came out. He coughed, a weak, rattling sound, and sagged against Bethany. "He is too ill, Alpha," Bethany called out, her voice clear. "His spirit is willing, but his body fails him." A flicker of annoyance passed over the false Alpha's face. Weston took a half-step forward, but a subtle gesture from the creature stopped him. "Then we shall strengthen his body," it declared. "Bring him forward. Let the pack's shared strength flow into him." My breath caught. This was it. A public healing that would either kill Henry or bind him to the creature's will. Two warriors moved toward Bethany and Henry. But then, a miracle. Henry's knees gave way completely. He collapsed, a dead weight in Bethany's arms before the warriors could reach him. His eyes rolled back. A collective gasp went up from the pack. Bethany looked up, her face a mask of healer's concern. "He needs immediate care, Alpha. The excitement has overwhelmed him." The false Alpha stared, its jaw tightening. The public moment was ruined. Forcing the issue now would seem cruel, not strong. After a tense, silent moment, it waved a dismissive hand. "See to him, healer. His pledge will wait." As Bethany and another Omega hurried Henry's limp form back toward the healing house, the creature's mask slipped for an instant. I saw pure, unadulterated fury in those stolen eyes. The contradiction had slipped through its claws. It turned its gaze back to the pack, the smile returning, but now it was a grimace. "Let this be a lesson. Weakness will be purged. By choice," it looked around the circle, "or by force." The gathering continued, but the mood had shifted to one of fear and confusion. The false Alpha announced increased patrols, new drills, all under Weston's direct command. It was consolidating military control. The noose was tightening. I sank back into my hollow, my mind racing. We had bought Henry one more night, but the creature was angry. It would act faster now. I had to meet Cale. I had to know what was on that ridge. As the pack was dismissed, I moved like a wraith through the darkening forest, heading for the creek bend north of the eastern ridge. The moon was a thin, weak sliver in the sky. The new moon was coming. I reached the meeting point, a secluded spot where the water babbled over stones. I waited, shrouded in willow branches. Cale came silently, his face grim in the starlight. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a small, torn piece of dark, coarse fabric. It reeked of the oily scent, but also of strange herbs and foreign wolf. "Found it snagged on a thorn, halfway down the ridge on our side," he said, his voice low and gravelly with fear. "It's not from our territory. The patrols Weston posted. They're not watching the border. They're facing inward, watching the village." The meaning was clear. The border was open. Shadow Fen was already here, hiding in our territory. Before I could process this, Cale's head jerked up, his nostrils flaring. His eyes met mine, wide with a sudden, primal terror. A new scent washed over us on a cold breeze carried down from the ridge. Not just the oily anomaly. This was the musky, aggressive scent of many, many wolves. a war scent. It was mixed with the metallic tang of weapons and a low, collective growl that vibrated through the very earth. The sound that followed was not a howl, but a deep, guttural chant in a language I didn't know, coming from the darkness of the eastern ridge. Kale's whisper was the sound of our world ending. "They're not infiltrating," he said. "They're already here. The ridge is crawling with them. Shadow Fen is in position." He grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging in. The gathering, it wasn't for the pack. It was a distraction. While we were all in the clearing, the chanting grew louder, more rhythmic. A drumbeat started, low and ominous, thrumming through the night. They surrounded the village. The ridge wasn't just infiltrated. It was occupied. Kale's words, delivered in a breathless, gravelly whisper at the creek bend, echoed in the hollow of Evelyn's skull as she crouched in the fern hollow. "They're already here, in force, surrounding us." The mandatory gathering hadn't been about consolidation. It had been a sleight of hand. While every pack member's eyes were on the false alpha in the clearing, the shadow Fen noose had tightened in the dark. The internal coup was now an imminent invasion. And she was a fugitive in her own home, her body a tapestry of healing bruises and screaming ribs. Crunch, the sound of a boot on dry pine needle 20 yards east. She froze, her breath locking in her throat. The patrols Weston had reoriented weren't just for show. They were hunting. Specifically her. "Nothing here," a young warrior's voice grumbled. "Rylan. Weston's seeing ghosts. The broken betas probably crawled off to die somewhere. Just keep moving," came the older, wearier reply of another warrior. "Orders are orders, and Weston's not in a forgiving mood." Their footsteps faded toward the southern tree line. Evelyn released her breath in a thin, silent stream. Broken Beta. The title was a brand, but the ember in her chest, the one that had survived Jason's rejection and Weston's boot, glowed hotter. It wasn't just vengeance anymore. It was survival for all of them. She waited a full 5 minutes, counting heartbeats, before slinking from her hollow and moving like mist toward the healing house. The village was unnervingly quiet in the post-dusk gloom. No casual conversations, no laughter from the communal fire pit. Only the low, anxious murmur of a people who sensed a storm but couldn't see the clouds. Windows were shuttered. The air tasted of damp earth and fear. Bethany was waiting, the healing house door cracked open just enough. A sliver of warm, herb-scented light cut across the packed earth. Evelyn slipped inside, and Bethany secured the bolt with a soft, final thud. "You're late," Bethany whispered, her kind face drawn with new lines of stress. "Weston was here, twice, demanded to search the storeroom, said he had reports of stolen supplies." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "I let him," Bethany said, a flicker of steel in her omega eyes. "After I moved you-know-what to the root cellar under the Elder's Hall. He stomped around, found nothing, and left looking like he'd swallowed a wasp. But he's suspicious, Evelyn. He knows you're not acting alone." If only I had known how deep his betrayal ran, Evelyn thought, the memory of Weston's smug cruelty by the creek a fresh wound. He wasn't just following a changed alpha's orders. He was the possessing creature's willing enforcer, clearing the path for the takeover. "It's worse than we thought," Evelyn said, moving to the work table where Bethany had laid out her research, aged parchments, vials of rare earth, bundles of wolfsbane and silverleaf. Kale confirmed it. The eastern ridge is a staging ground. Shadow Fen warriors, maybe 24, are dug in. The gathering was a distraction. We're not just corrupted, we're besieged. Bethany paled, her hand fluttering to her throat. "The full binding, the new moon, is tomorrow night. They're not waiting. They're positioning themselves to strike the moment the transfer is complete and the pack's will is fully subsumed." "Exactly." Evelyn's gaze fell on the parchments. One depicted a complex sigil, a knot of interlocking lines that pulsed with a malevolent energy even in the drawing. The soul-binding sigil. "Have you found it?" A counter. Bethany's expression turned grim. "Fragments. Old lore. This kind of magic, it's a parasite. It attaches to the host's spirit here." She pointed to the center of the sigil, "and feeds on their strength until it can fully displace them. To break it, you need to disrupt the flow, sever the connection at the source of the power." "Which is?" "The shadow Fen Alpha, the creature in our alpha's skin. It has to be drawing power from its true body or from a focal point to maintain the binding from a distance. Break its concentration, wound its spirit, and the binding might snap." "Might," Evelyn echoed, the word tasting like ash. "It's not an exact science, Evelyn. This is forbidden magic for a reason," Bethany hissed, then lowered her voice. "The most direct way would be to physically harm the possessing entity, but that means attacking Jason's body. And if the binding is too far along, you could kill Jason instead," Evelyn finished, the horror of it a physical weight on her broken ribs. The man she cherished, trapped behind his own eyes. To save him, she might have to cut him down. The irony was a dagger twist. A sharp, rhythmic knock at the door. 3 taps, a pause, 2 more, their agreed signal. Cale. Bethany hurried to let him in. The veteran warrior entered, bringing the scent of cold night and tension with him. His face was grim under a layer of forest grime. "Weston's pulled all perimeter patrols," Cale said without preamble, accepting a water skin from Bethany. "Every warrior is now on village duty, maintaining order. The borders are wide open. The Shadow Fen could march in a column, and we wouldn't know until they were at the lodge steps." "They already are at the steps," Evelyn said. "They're on the ridge." Cale nodded, his jaw tight. "I saw their sentries. They're not even hiding now. They're watching us like we're livestock in a pen." I also listened. "They're chanting it's changed. It's not preparation anymore. It's a countdown." The 3 of them stood in the dim light, a tiny council of the doomed. An Omega healer, a disgraced Beta, and a warrior who'd chosen conscience over command. What happened next changed everything. Because Evelyn, looking from Bethany's desperate hope to Cale's hardened resolve, saw not a dead end, but a terrible, narrow path. "We need to force its hand," she said, her voice low and steady. "We can't wait for the new moon. We need to strike tonight. Disrupt the ritual before it's complete." "With what army?" Cale asked, not with skepticism, but with a warrior's need for logistics. "Not an army, a distraction. A big, messy, undeniable problem that the false Alpha and Weston will have to deal with personally." Evelyn's mind raced, pieces clicking into a reckless, dangerous plan. "Bethany, you said the binding is a parasite. What if we introduced, a sickness? Not to the pack, to the land. Something that would disrupt the magical flow they're using." Bethany's eyes widened. "The creek. It runs from the eastern ridge through the territory past the lodge. It's a natural ley line. If they're using the land's energy to fuel the binding, we poison the well." Cale grasped it immediately. "With what?" Bethany scurried to her shelves, pulling down a clay jar sealed with wax. "Purified silver dust, mixed with crushed moonbane and salt from the Weeping Cliffs. It's inert to us in this form, but to a focused magical working, it would be like throwing sand into a watch's gears. It would cause a backlash. Where would we need to place it?" Evelyn asked. "At the confluence, where the creek meets the spring beneath the eastern ridge. That's the source." Bethany's face fell. "But that's the heart of their position now." A slow, fierce smile touched Cale's lips. It was the smile of a wolf with its back to the cliff. "Then we give them a bigger problem to chase. A fire in their storehouse, a riot in the village. You," he looked at Evelyn, "need to be seen. You need to be the flame that draws the moth." The plan was insane. It was a dozen moving parts, each one likely to fail. But it was action. It was a claw raised against the crushing dark. "I'll be the flame," Evelyn agreed, the ember in her chest blazing into a contained fire. "But I'm not just drawing the moth. I'm getting close enough to see its eyes. I need to get to the lodge. I need to see Jason. The real Jason. I need to know if there's anything left to save." Bethany looked like she wanted to argue, but she saw the unshakable resolve in Evelyn's gaze. She simply nodded, pressing the clay jar into Cale's hands. "The confluence is a narrow cave behind the waterfall. You'll know it by the black moss. Dump the entire contents into the pool, then run." Cale tucked the jar into his tunic. "I'll need a diversion to get up the ridge, a loud one." "Leave that to me," Evelyn said. "Meet back at the Fern Hollow by midnight, if I'm not there." "We'll assume you're dead," Cale said bluntly, "and we'll act accordingly." The pact was sealed in silence. The sounds of the night became a map. The distant, rhythmic thump of a warrior patrol. The nervous bleat of goats in their pen. The low, insidious drone of the chanting from the ridge, a sound felt in the teeth more than heard. Evelyn moved not as a wolf, but as a shadow of her former self, using every trick of stealth she'd learned as Beta. She avoided the main paths, sticking to drainage ditches and the lee of storage huts. Her destination, the training grounds equipment shed. If only I had known how simple it would be to sow chaos. The shed was unlocked, the pack's discipline eroded by the pervasive fear. Inside, she found what she needed: a coil of stout rope, a pot of pitch used for waterproofing leather, and a bundle of rags. Her ribs screamed in protest as she worked, but the pain was a focus. She soaked the rags in pitch, tied one to an arrow she took from a neglected quiver, and created a crude, heavy fuse with the rest, leading from the shed's rear into a pile of dry straw bedding. The strike of flint was deafening in the quiet. The whoosh of igniting pitch was a beautiful, terrifying sound. The flame raced along the rag fuse, hungry and bright. Evelyn didn't wait. She snatched the bow and the single-pitched arrow and ran. From the cover of the woodpile near the communal kitchens, she watched. The fuse reached the straw. Foomph. Fire erupted, orange and violent, licking up the side of the equipment shed. For a moment, there was only the crackle of flame, then a shout, then another. A bell began to clang, a frantic metallic clang-clang-clang that shattered the night's dread-filled quiet. Fire training grounds. Warriors poured from their posts, converging on the blaze. Confusion reigned. In the chaotic, flickering light, Evelyn saw her moment. She knocked her pitched arrow, drew the bowstring, her muscles protesting, and aimed not at the fire, but at the thatched roof of the granary 30 yards away. She let the arrow fly. It sailed in a high, flaming arc, a tiny comet against the dark sky. It struck the dry thatch and stuck, flame quickly spreading. A second, larger fire bloomed. "Now, Cale, go." As the village descended into full-blown panic, with warriors scrambling for water and Weston's furious bellow cutting through the noise, Evelyn melted away. The diversion was perfect. All eyes were on the village center, on the twin beacons of disaster. She moved uphill toward the Alpha's lodge. It stood dark and silent, a sentinel ignoring the chaos below. The chanting from the ridge had stopped. Good. The balcony she'd spied from before was her goal. The climb was agony, each pull of her arms sending lances of fire through her side. She gritted her teeth, found footholds in the rough-hewn logs, and hauled herself over the railing, collapsing onto the cold planks with a stifled gasp. Inside, through the glass doors, she could see the study. A single oil lamp burned on the desk, and there he was, Jason. He stood facing the window, his back to her, silhouetted by the distant firelight of the village below. His posture was rigid, his head bowed as if in immense strain. He was alone. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She eased the door open, just a crack, and slipped inside. The scent hit her first, not just Jason's familiar pine and ember scent, but that underlying, oily wrongness thicker here, cloying. "Jason," she whispered, the name a prayer and a plea. He stiffened. Slowly, he began to turn. What she saw would haunt her forever. It was Jason's face, but it was a mask of torment. His eyes, usually the warm gray of a winter sky, were fractured, flashes of gray fighting against a deep, viscous black that swam in them like oil. His jaw was clenched, tendons standing out in his neck. A low, guttural sound emanated from his throat, a sound of two voices struggling for control. Evelyn." It was his voice, strained, desperate, clawing its way to the surface. "Run, please." The blackness in his eyes swelled, threatening to drown the gray. His expression smoothed into the cold, alien mask she'd seen at the gathering. The false alpha smiled with Jason's mouth. "The little contradiction returns," it said, Jason's voice layered with a sibilant, foreign echo. "Drawn to the flame of your former attachment. How pathetic." Evelyn stood her ground, her fists clenched. "Get out of him." "He is mine. This pack is mine. The binding is nearly complete. Your petty fires change nothing." It took a step toward her, movements oddly jerky, as if Jason's body fought every inch. "You should have crawled away. Now I will enjoy breaking you myself. Weston's methods lack artistry." It raised a hand, and dark tendrils of shadow, tangible and cold, began to coil from its fingertips. But Evelyn was watching Jason's eyes. In the flicker of the lamp, she saw it, a brilliant, defiant flash of pure gray. And his hand, his right hand, twitched violently at his side, curling into a fist. "He's in there. He's fighting." "Jason," she screamed, not at the creature, but at the man trapped behind it. "Fight it! I'm here. I know you're in there." The shadow tendrils faltered. The false alpha's face contorted in a snarl of rage and effort. "Silence!" A wave of oppressive, mind-numbing force slammed into Evelyn, driving her to her knees. It was a pressure against her very spirit, seeking to crush her will. She cried out, her vision swimming. But from Jason's body came a raw, agonized roar. "Evelyn!" His own hand shot up and grabbed the wrist of the hand controlling the shadows, forcing it down. The two forces warred in a single body, a horrific, silent struggle. Jason's head whipped toward her, his gray eyes blazing with a final, lucid clarity. "The stone," he gasped, every word a monumental effort. "My father's heartstone in the desk. It's the anchor. Smash it." The blackness surged back, swallowing the gray. "No!" The false alpha regained full control, backhanding Jason's own body across the face with brutal force. But the secret was out. The anchor, the focal point. It was here in the room. The creature turned its full, murderous attention on Evelyn, all pretense gone. "You will die now." Evelyn scrambled backward as it advanced. Her eyes darted to the heavy oak desk. The heartstone, she had to reach it, but the doors to the study burst open. Weston stood there, flanked by two hulking warriors, his face alight with vicious triumph. "I knew she'd come here," Weston spat. "Secure her." As the warriors lunged, and the false alpha gathered its shadowy power for a killing blow, Evelyn made a desperate dive, not for the door, but for the desk drawer. Her fingers closed around a small, cold, intricately carved stone that pulsed with a sickly, familiar oil-black light. She had it, and every enemy in the room turned to kill her for it. The world narrowed to the cold, dark gleam of the heartstone in my palm and the monstrous shadow of the thing wearing Jason's face, poised to strike. Weston's triumphant snarl echoed from the doorway. I was trapped. The anchor was in my hand, but the binding was unbroken, and the false alpha's killing blow was a heartbeat away. Crack. The sound wasn't from the creature. It was from the stone itself. A hairline fracture, glowing with a fierce inner blue light, split the obsidian surface. The false alpha flinched as if struck, a ripple of distortion passing over Jason's features. "What is that?" Weston barked, his certainty faltering. I didn't know, but I felt it. A pulse, warm and defiant, beating in time with my own frantic heart. It was Jason's essence, his true will, fighting from within the prison of his own body, resonating with the Heartstone, his father's legacy, the soul of the pack. The false alpha recovered, its borrowed eyes burning with renewed fury. A final spark. It changes nothing. Kill her, Weston, crush the stone. Weston and two warriors surged forward. But the distraction, that tiny fracture, had bought me a second. I didn't think. I acted. I threw myself not away, but toward the massive oak desk, rolling behind its solid bulk as claws swiped the air where my throat had been. Wood splintered above my head. The Heartstone was scorching hot now, the blue light bleeding through my fingers. "The ley line is disrupted," Cale's voice, ragged and fierce, shouted from the hallway. The sound of clashing bodies, snarls, and the distinct thud of a well-placed kick followed. He'd made it. He'd completed his sabotage and come for me. Chaos erupted. The false alpha roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage that shook the lodge. "You dare!" The connection. Cale had severed the Shadow Fen's magical feed from the creek source. The binding was destabilizing. I could see it. The creature's form flickered, like a bad transmission. Jason's own face, contorted in agony, flashed through for an instant. Now. It has to be now. Scrambling to my knees behind the desk, I looked at the Heartstone. How do you break a magical anchor? Smash it. The thought felt blasphemous. But Jason's voice, his true voice from moments before, echoed in my memory. "It's not just a stone, it's a covenant." A covenant required agreement, a will. Weston rounded the desk, his eyes wild. "You've ruined everything, you pathetic wretch." I didn't answer him. I closed my eyes, clutching the fracturing Heartstone to my own chest, over the scars his betrayal had left. I poured every memory, every feeling of the pack as it was, as it should be, into that stone. The warmth of the communal fire, the trust in a brother's watchful gaze, the fierce, unbreakable loyalty of a beta for her alpha, for Jason. I rejected the cold, the fear, the oily scent of conquest. I affirmed the bond, not as it was now, but as it was meant to be. The blue light exploded. It wasn't a destructive blast, but a wave of pure, clean energy. It washed through the study, silent and profound. The shadows clinging to the corners shrieked and dissolved. Weston was thrown back against the bookshelf, not by force, but by the sheer, overwhelming truth of it. The false alpha staggered, clutching its head. "No, this is my vessel, this pack is mine." But Jason's voice, weak but clear, gritted out from the same lips. "Never!" The Heartstone in my hands was no longer black. It was a core of brilliant blue, cradled in a web of glowing cracks. It was beautiful, and it was dying. The covenant was being fulfilled, its power expended to break the foreign hold. The creature within Jason convulsed. It was being unmade, not by brute force, but by the very pack spirit it had tried to corrupt. The binding was unraveling. What happened next changed everything. As the false alpha's form destabilized, a wisp of concentrated shadow, a shred of its malignant consciousness, detached from Jason and with a final, spiteful surge shot across the room. Not at me, at Weston. It streamed into his open, snarling mouth. He gagged, his eyes flying wide, not with pain, but with sudden, horrifying understanding. Then they glossed over, hardening into familiar, ruthless obsidian. Jason collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a heavy thud, his own face pale but finally, blessedly, his own. The oppressive weight of the false alpha's presence vanished from the room. But Weston slowly stood up. He rolled his shoulders, a grotesque parody of a stretch, and looked at his own hands. A cruel, satisfied smile spread across his face, a perfect mirror of the expression the false alpha had worn on Jason's. A lesser vessel, Weston's voice said, layered with that other oily tone. But a willing one, so much more efficient. My blood turned to ice. Cale appeared in the shattered doorway, panting, his knuckles bloody. He took in the scene, Jason unconscious on the floor, me crouched with the fading heartstone, and Weston transformed. "Beta?" Cale asked, his warrior's instinct sensing the wrongness. "The beta is gone," the thing inside Weston said pleasantly. "The alpha is broken, the pack is leaderless." He looked directly at me, and the hatred there was personal, intimate. It was Weston's own hatred, now fused with and amplified by the Shadow Fen Alpha's malice. "Except for me." He raised his voice, a command infused with unnatural power that echoed through the lodge and out into the night. "Warriors, to me. The traitor Evelyn has assaulted our true alpha. She has broken the Heartsdone. See the proof in her hands." The remaining warriors in the hall, confused and agitated, pushed past Cale. They saw Jason down. They saw me, the disgraced former beta, holding the shattered, glowing core of their pack's legacy. They saw Weston, their standing beta, in command. The narrative snapped into place, perfectly constructed by our enemy. Cale moved to block them. "Wait, this is a trick." "Weston is." A warrior I didn't know, his face a mask of loyal fury, slammed a fist into Cale's jaw, driving him to his knees. "Traitor's ally." I was on my feet, the Heartstone's light guttering like a dying star. "Jason is your alpha. Look at him, Weston is possessed." But Jason was motionless, a king dethroned in the middle of a coup. The warrior's eyes, trained on hierarchy and visible strength, saw only chaos and a convenient culprit. Me, Weston, the possessed Weston, smiled. "Secure the traitor. Take the relic. Guard the alpha's body. The pack is under my protection until he recovers." His words were poison, dripping with false concern and decisive authority. Hands grabbed me. I fought, but my strength was spent, my body a symphony of old and new pains. The dying Heartstone was wrenched from my grasp. Its light faded completely, leaving a cold, fractured lump of rock. As I was dragged past Cale, held down by two burly warriors, our eyes met. His gaze held a promise, a plan forming amidst the ruin. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the window. Escape. Not fight. Bethany. I had to get to Bethany. "The healer," the false Weston mused aloud, as if reading my desperate thought. "She was complicit. Find the Omega. Bring her to the gathering circle. The pack will witness the price of treason." No, oh, goddess, no. I was hauled out of the lodge, into the chaotic night. The diversion fires in the village were being put out, casting dancing shadows on faces filled with fear and confusion. The pack was gathering, drawn by Weston's powerful summons and the shockwaves of magical disruption. They saw me, dragged through their midst like a trophy of war. "That's Evelyn. She attacked the Alpha. She destroyed the Heartstone." The lies spread, faster than truth. Weston followed behind, a picture of grim authority. He ascended the platform in the central clearing, the place he'd once stood beside Jason. Now he stood alone. "Packmates," he boomed, the shadow power giving his voice a reach it never had before. "We have been betrayed from within. Evelyn, driven by jealousy and spite for her rightful demotion, conspired with outsiders to murder Alpha Jason and shatter our sacred bonds." A collective gasp, a wave of anger washed over the crowd. I struggled against my captors, my voice raw. "He's lying. Jason is alive. Weston is the traitor. The Shadow Fen is here." My shouts were drowned out by the crowd's growing fury. A rotten tomato flew from the darkness, splattering against my cheek. The scent of rage and fear was suffocating. "Silence her," Weston commanded coolly. A warrior's hand clamped over my mouth. I bit down, tasting blood and leather, but it was futile. The ley line attack was her doing. The fires were her signal, Weston continued, weaving truth into his false tapestry. But our vigilance prevailed. The attackers on the ridge have been repelled. He said this with such conviction that the pack warriors, who had been ordered to ignore the ridge, now believed they had fought a battle there. The mind game was terrifying. Our true enemy, he pointed a damning finger at me, was already among us. He had them. Every doubt, every fear about Jason's changed behavior, every anxiety about the strange scents and sounds. He focused it all onto a single, acceptable target. Me. "Where is the Alpha?" someone cried from the crowd. "Grievously wounded. Under the care of my most loyal warriors," Weston said, his voice dropping to a pained, solemn tone. "The healer, Bethany, used her position to weaken him to aid this snake." He gestured to me. "She will be brought to answer for her crimes." At that moment, Bethany was shoved through the crowd, her hands bound, her face pale but defiant. Our eyes locked across the sea of hostile faces. There was no fear in her gaze, only a deep, profound sorrow, and a warning. She shook her head slightly. "Don't speak, don't fight." Weston saw the exchange. His smile was a slit of triumph. "At dawn, before the full assembly, justice will be served. The pack's strength will be purified in their blood." A roar of approval, bloodthirsty and desperate for order, shook the clearing. The pack had chosen. They had chosen the strong, the certain, the vicious lie over the shattered, complicated truth. I was thrown into the old, disused stockade at the edge of the clearing, a cage of ironwood and silver-infused chains designed to hold the strongest, most feral rogue. The door clanged shut. The lock engaged with a final, heavy click. The sounds of the pack, whipped into a fever pitch by Weston's rhetoric, slowly faded as they dispersed, leaving only the quiet of the deep night and the guard's footsteps outside. Alone in the dark, the cold of the silver seeping into my bones, I finally let the despair wash over me. I had done it. I had broken the binding. I had saved Jason's soul. And in doing so, I had delivered my pack, bound and gagged, to a smarter, crueler, and infinitely more willing monster. Weston, with his existing authority and his deep-seated hatred for me, was a far more effective puppet than Jason ever could have been. The shadow Fen Alpha didn't have to fight for control anymore. Weston welcomed it. The Heartstone was gone, its magic spent. Jason was comatose or dead. Bethany was captured. Cale was beaten and branded a traitor. I was in a cage. I had never felt more utterly, completely defeated. The scrape of a boot on gravel outside. Not the guard's regular patrol. A softer step. A shadow fell across the small, barred window of the stockade door. Not Weston. Not a warrior. Cale's face, bruised and bloody, appeared in the moonlight. He pressed a finger to his lips. In his other hand, he held a set of lockpicks, glinting faintly. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me, his eyes urgent. "The plan failed," he whispered, his voice barely a breath of sound. "But the war isn't over. He's making one mistake." I crawled to the door, the silver chains clinking. "What?" Cale's jaw was set, his gaze burning with a fierce, desperate light. "He's keeping Jason alive. He's having him move to the healing house under guard. Says he needs proof of the crime until the execution is done." A spark, tiny and fragile, ignited in the frozen darkness of my spirit. "Bethany," I breathed. "Bound in her own storeroom, 2 guards." He started working on the heavy lock, his movements precise and silent. "He wants a spectacle at dawn. He's arrogant. He thinks he's won." The first tumbler clicked open. "What's your plan?" I asked, my mind racing, scraping the bottom of a well I thought was empty. Kale met my eyes. "You're the beta, the real beta. What's ours?" The question hung in the cold air. I looked past him toward the healing house on the hill, where Jason, the true heart of the pack, lay helpless, where Bethany, its soul, was imprisoned, where Weston, the usurper, thought his victory was secure. The spark grew into a flame. Vengeance had brought me here, but this was something else. This was a last stand, not for myself but for them, for the pack that had just condemned me. If only I had known the cost of that spark. If only I had known what waited in the healing house wasn't just a wounded alpha, but a truth so devastating it would make the betrayal I'd already suffered feel like a gentle prelude. The final lock clicked. Kale slowly began to pull the door open, its hinges groaning a protest he muffled with his hand. Freedom, cold and dangerous, beckoned. But as the door swung wide, a new sound cut through the night, not from the village but from the eastern ridge. A low, rhythmic drumming, and a chorus of howls not of our pack but of the shadow fen. They weren't repelled. They were advancing, and they were answering the call of their new, perfectly placed alpha. Weston hadn't just taken the pack. He'd invited the enemy inside the gates. The execution at dawn wasn't just a purge. It was the opening ceremony. The howls from the eastern ridge were not a warning. They were a greeting. The sound, oily and triumphant, slithered through the night and wrapped around Evelyn's heart like a frozen chain. What happened next changed everything. The failed victory had not just led to defeat. It had opened the gates. Inside the cramped, damp hollow behind the stockade where Kale had hidden her, Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cold earth. The pack's panic was a palpable scent on the air. Confusion, fear, a bitter tang of betrayal aimed squarely at her. "They're here," Kale whispered, his face grim in the faint moonlight filtering through the brush. A fresh cut marred his temple, evidence of his struggle to reach her. "Weston, or the thing inside him, he's not even hiding it anymore. The eastern patrols have been called in. The ridge is swarming with their wolves." Evelyn's ribs screamed with every breath, a constant reminder of Weston's boot and her own desperate fight. But a colder, sharper clarity had settled over her shattered spirit. "He needs the pack to see us die, to cement his story, to make our execution the founding myth of his new reign." "He has Bethany," Kale said, the words heavy. "He's keeping Jason alive but sedated in the healing house. Proof of your savage attack. They're both to be brought out at dawn, before the whole pack and the Shadow Fen Alpha's emissaries." He spat the last word. The plan from before was ashes. No stealthy sabotage, no targeted strike. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and branded enemies. Evelyn closed her eyes, not in defeat, but in focus. She listened past the distant, alien howls, past the agitated murmurs of the village. She listened for the memory of a sound, Jason's true laugh, the crackle of a shared hearth, the steady rhythm of a pack that was home. The heartstone was dust, but its echo was in her. It's not about breaking the binding anymore, she realized. It's about breaking the lie. "We can't fight them all," Evelyn said, her voice low and rough. "So we don't. We fight the story." Kale frowned. "How? We give the pack a better one." She met his eyes. "You said the Shadow Fen wolves are on the ridge. They're not in the village yet." "Not yet. Weston's orders. He wants the pack's full, undivided attention for the spectacle." A brittle, dangerous hope sparked. "Then there's still a stage, and we still have players. Get me into the healing house before dawn." "It's guarded, Weston's most loyal." "I know." Evelyn's smile held no warmth. "But they're guarding against a traitor trying to finish the job or escape. What if the traitor comes to surrender?" The village was a ghost of itself. Warriors loyal to Weston patrolled in tense, silent pairs, their eyes scanning the shadows they now feared. The familiar scents of pine and hearth smoke were tainted by the lingering, oily wrongness and a thick, anticipatory dread. Evelyn moved like one of those ghosts, Kayla's shadow at her back, using paths only a former beta would know. If only I had known how fragile our peace was, she thought, passing the training grounds where she and Jason had once sparred. A single crack, and the darkness pours in. They reached the rear of the healing house. 2 warriors stood at the door, postures rigid. Evelyn didn't hide. She stepped into the dim light of a lone torch, her hands raised, her body language screaming exhaustion and surrender. "I give up," she called, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. "Please, I can't run anymore. I need to see him. I need to explain." The warriors startled, hands flying to their weapons. One sneered. "The traitor returns. Weston said you might try something like this." "To do what?" Evelyn let her shoulders slump, the picture of broken defiance. "You have Bethany, you have him. The pack hates me. The Shadow Fen are at our border, invited because of me. Where can I go?" She took a step closer, letting them see the tears she forced to her eyes. "Let me see Jason one last time. Let me say goodbye. Then you can take me to the stockade. My resistance is over." The warriors exchanged a glance. This was within their expectations. A final, pathetic plea. The sneering one nodded. "Disarm her, search her, then you can have 5 minutes. Weston will want her secure before the gathering." They patted her down, finding no weapon but the small, sharp sliver of heartstone crystal she had secretly palmed from the storeroom floor. Not a weapon, but a memory. They missed it. They ushered her inside, Kale melting back into the shadows to wait. The healing house was different. The herb-scented warmth was stifled, replaced by the cold, metallic smell of armed guards. 2 more stood inside the main room. And there, in the corner, bound with silver-laced ropes, was Bethany. Her eyes widened, filled not with hope but with terror for Evelyn. "No," Bethany mouthed silently. Evelyn gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. "Trust me." "He's in there," a guard grunted, jerking his head toward the closed door of the private ward. 5 minutes. Try anything and the Omega dies first." The door clicked shut behind her. Jason lay on the cot, pale and still, but breathing. The physical wounds from their struggle were bandaged, but the real damage was deeper. The binding was broken, but his spirit had been ravaged. Evelyn approached, her heart a drum of grief and fury. She knelt, ignoring the pain. "Jason," she whispered, taking his limp hand. It was cold. "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. The fight isn't over." Nothing, not a flicker of an eyelid. She pressed the sliver of heartstone into his palm, folding his fingers around it. "You told me the anchor was the stone. It was. But the foundation was always the pack. Our pack. The one you built. The one you loved." Her voice broke. "He's using your face, your voice, your beta to destroy it. And I can't stop him alone. I need you. They need you." She leaned closer, her lips almost brushing his ear, her words a desperate, fervent vow. "You are Jason, alpha of this pack. You are the wolf who led us through the winter famine. You are the man who found a lost pup and carried her home on your shoulders. You are my friend, my anchor. Come back." A sound escaped her, a raw, quiet sob. She rested her forehead against their clasped hands. The silence in the room was absolute. Then a finger twitched. Evelyn froze. She looked down. Jason's hand tightened ever so slightly around the crystal shard. His eyelids fluttered. A breath, deeper than the shallow rhythms before, filled his chest. His eyes opened. They were clouded with pain, hazy with confusion, but they were his. The cold, alien gold was gone, replaced by the storm gray she remembered. Ellen!" The word was a ragged scrape of sound. Relief, so potent it was dizzying, flooded her. "I'm here." He tried to sit up, weakness pulling him back. His gaze cleared, focusing on her face, on her bruises, on the desperation in her eyes. Memory returned in a painful wave. Shame and anguish contorted his features. "What have I done?" "You fought," she said fiercely. "You held on long enough to tell me the truth. Now we fight together. Weston is possessed. The Shadow Fen are on the ridge. The pack believes I tried to kill you." He absorbed this, the Alpha's mind forcing itself through the fog. "The gathering, at dawn." "Yes, where he executes us and presents your body to the Shadow Fen, transferring leadership." Jason's jaw set. A spark of the old fire returned. "No." With a grunt of immense effort, he pushed himself upright. "Help me up. You're too weak. Help me up, Beta." The command, though feeble, was unmistakable. It was the voice of her Alpha. She obeyed, sliding an arm around him, bearing his weight. He swayed, but his feet held. He looked at the door, then at her. "A stage, you said. We give them a better story." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Then let's go rewrite the ending." The central clearing was packed as the first gray light of dawn bled into the sky. The entire pack was there, a sea of anxious faces. At the front, on a raised platform usually used for announcements, stood Weston. But it wasn't Weston. His posture was too fluid, his smile too wide and sharp. The oily scent wafted from him, unmistakable now in the open air. Behind him, a contingent of strange, sleek-furred wolves with eyes like polished jet watched from the tree line, the Shadow Fen emissaries. "Brothers and sisters," false Weston's voice boomed, smooth and compelling. "We stand at the dawn of a new age, a stronger age. Last night you saw the venom in our midst, the betrayal that sought to poison our Alpha, to shatter the very heart of our home." He gestured, and two warriors dragged Bethany forward. She stood straight, her defiance a silent scream. Then they brought out a stretcher. Jason lay upon it, eyes closed, the picture of a leader cut down. A collective gasp rippled through the pack. Murmurs of anger, directed at the empty space where the traitor should be. "The traitor, Evelyn, remains at large," Weston cried. "But her accomplices are here. This Omega, who used her healing arts to weaken our Alpha, and our own Alpha, struck down by the one he cherished most. This is the fruit of weakness, of sentiment. The Shadow Fen do not offer conquest. They offer an alliance of strength. They saw our vulnerability and have come to help us purge it." The pack stirred, confused. The narrative was slick, covering fear with the promise of power. "And to seal this alliance," Weston announced, his eyes gleaming with stolen triumph, "we will root out the last corruption. We will execute the conspirators, and I, as your new Alpha, will lead you into. You will lead them nowhere." The voice was not loud, but it cut through the morning air like a knife. It was weak, hoarse, but utterly, undeniably familiar. Every head turned. From the path leading to the healing house, two figures emerged. Evelyn, battered but unbroken, supporting the weight of Jason. He walked, each step an act of sheer will, his arm around her shoulders. He was pale, he was wounded, but his eyes were open and clear, fixed on Weston. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rustle of leaves and a sharp intake of breath from Bethany. Weston's face went slack with shock, then contorted with rage. An illusion, a trick, seize them. But the warriors beside him hesitated, staring at their true Alpha. Jason stopped at the edge of the crowd. The pack parted before him, a wave of awe and confusion. He looked at his people, his gaze sweeping over them, and then back to Weston. "You speak of strength, Weston," Jason said, his voice gaining strength with every word. "But what strength is there in theft, in possession? You are not my Beta. You are a ghost wearing his skin. You and the creature you serve invaded my mind, poisoned our bonds, and betrayed every oath you ever swore to this pack." "Lies," Weston shrieked, the mask slipping completely, revealing the frantic alien hatred beneath. He is bewitched. The traitor Evelyn controls him. Warrior, I am your alpha. Jason's roar, though strained, was a thunderclap of pure, resonant authority. It was the voice that had led them in battle, that had comforted them in loss. It shook the clearing. Look at him, smell the air. That is not the scent of our pack. That is the stench of the shadow fen, the same enemy we bled to repel not 5 winters past. And he has invited them to our hearth. He pointed a trembling finger at the shadow fen wolves, who were now shifting uneasily, their predatory focus intensifying. The pack's confusion crystallized into a dawning, horrified understanding. They looked between the 2 figures, the one on the platform, radiating wrongness and grand promises, and the one in their midst, broken but real, calling them to remember who they were. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. He tried to make you forget. He tried to make you fear loyalty and call it weakness. He tried to make you hate your own hearts. Is that our strength? Or is our strength in the wolf beside us? In the bonds that cannot be stolen, only betrayed? Weston saw his narrative crumbling. With a snarl of pure malice, he shifted. But the form he took was wrong. A grotesque, too large hybrid of Weston and the shadow creature, fur dark as a starless night, eyes burning with sickly gold light. Then die in your sentiment, he screamed, and launched himself from the platform not at Jason, but at Evelyn. The attack was a blur, but Jason moved. With a surge of desperate strength, he shoved Evelyn aside and met the charge. It was not a fight of equals. Jason was too weak. False Weston's claws raked his side, sending him sprawling. The pack cried out. Evelyn didn't think. She shifted. Pain exploded through her injuries, but it was drowned by a wave of protective fury. As False Weston stood over Jason, ready to deliver the killing blow, she slammed into his flank. They rolled, a tangle of fang and claw. He was stronger, infused with alien power. He pinned her, his jaws dripping saliva near her throat. His mind voice slithered into hers. You lose, little beta. His body dies. Then yours. The pack is ours. No, she thought back, not with defiance but with a memory. She poured it into the fading pack bond, not to the false alpha, but to every wolf listening. The memory of Jason handing her the beta's sigil, the trust in his eyes, the weight of the duty, and the joy of shared purpose. The bond, so long suppressed and poisoned, flickered. From the stretcher on the platform, Bethany, her hands still bound, began to sing. It was an old Omega lament, a song of mourning and remembrance. Her pure, unwavering voice cut through the snarls. Then another voice joined. Kale from the crowd, howling a warrior's challenge, the true challenge for a traitor. One by one, like embers catching wind, the pack joined. A howl not of aggression, but of identity, a chorus of remembrance. We are here. We are the pack. The combined will, focused through the restored fragment of the bond, was a tangible force. False Weston flinched, his grip on Evelyn loosening for a split second. It was enough. Jason, bleeding and barely conscious, shifted one last time. With a final, monumental effort, he lunged and locked his jaws not on Weston's throat, but on the place where the neck met the shoulder, the killing strike of an alpha to a traitor beta. There was a crack, a gurgled shriek that was both Weston's and something else, and then a violent, convulsive shudder. A wisp of dark smoke seemed to flee the body, dissipating with a silent scream in the morning light. The grotesque form collapsed, shrinking back into the shape of Weston, eyes empty and staring. Silence returned, heavy and breathless. Jason fell back, shifting to human form, his hand pressed to the bloody wounds on his side. Evelyn shifted too, crawling to him. The pack watched, frozen. Jason looked up at his people, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The threat from within is over. He coughed, a speck of blood on his lip. Now defend your home from the threat without. His words were the trigger. The Shadow Fen emissaries, seeing their vessel destroyed, let out a unified, furious howl and surged from the tree line. But they were not facing a confused, divided pack anymore. Kale was the first to move, shifting and leaping to meet the charge with a roar. For the Alpha, for the pack, the clearing erupted into chaos. But it was a chaos of purpose, of fury redirected at its true source. The battle was fierce, but the Shadow Fen, expecting a subdued and compliant pack, were met with the full, united fury of wolves defending a home they had just reclaimed. Evelyn held Jason, applying pressure to his wounds. Bethany was at her side in moments, having been freed, her hands already glowing with a soft, healing light as she worked. Jason's eyes found Evelyn's. The guilt and sorrow in them were bottomless. "I'm sorry. For everything. I felt I could not stop it." "You fought," she repeated, tears streaming down her face freely now. "You came back." He lifted a trembling hand to her cheek. "You brought me back." His gaze held hers, the bond between them, though scarred and changed, humming with a truth that no magic could erase. "My Beta. My Evelyn." Around them, the sounds of battle began to recede as the pack, fighting with the ferocity of the wronged, drove the invaders back toward the ridge. The dawn's light grew stronger, painting the clearing in gold and crimson. The vengeance was complete, not the hot, destructive rage she had first nurtured in the healing house, but a colder, cleaner justice. The lie was broken. The usurper was dead. The pack remembered itself. As Bethany's healing energy knit Jason's worst wounds, and the triumphant howls of their warriors echoed from the ridge, Evelyn knew the rebirth was just beginning. The wounds, inside and out, would take time to heal. Trust would need to be rebuilt. The memory of the shadow would linger. But as Jason's hand tightened in hers, and she looked out at their pack, battered but victorious, howling a song of belonging into the new day, Evelyn knew the foundation was solid. It had been tested in fire and shadow, and it had held. They were home.